The introduction of a voiced protagonist to Fallout 4 was a bit of a shock for many people. It actually annoyed quite a few people, and many of us were pretty skeptical as to whether or not it would work in a Fallout game or a Bethesda game for that matter. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. Of course, whether or not you enjoy a voiced protagonist in your games or perhaps prefer a silent protagonist, that is going to come down to personal taste. However, I want to get a few things down, solidified straight away. I want to dispel a couple of myths by discussing what a voiced protagonist actually brings to a game versus a silent protagonist. The reason I want to do that is A, I think it's essential to understanding whether or not it was a good idea for Fallout 4, but also because B, a lot of people were using language that suggested the voiced protagonist option was a step forward. People were using language like, well, it's about time it had a voiced protagonist, as if this was a natural progression, something that games should strive for, all games, and I would like to contest that assertion. At the same time, I am not saying a voiced protagonist is a step backwards. Indeed, what I'm saying is it's a step sideways. It is a different way of doing things, and it comes with some strengths and it comes with some weaknesses. And that's what I want to talk about first of all. Now, obviously, again, there are personal taste issues. Some people prefer a voiced protagonist purely because they prefer to hear lines than read them. Although, very often in these games, you have to read the line before you say it. But what I want to really focus on are the advantages, not for the person who has a certain preference, but for the game, what the game is trying to achieve. The most obvious strength for a voiced protagonist, in my opinion, is that it allows the developers to express the character they want to express, to make the protagonist sound the way they envisage him. And this is something that will make it a little easier for them to tell the story they are trying to tell. A great example of this is The Witcher 3. Geralt of Rivia has a very unique voice, and it's part of his character. And we all know what he looks like, and we all know what he sounds like. And this allows them a little more freedom in things like cutscenes. They can obviously have multiple lines of dialogue. It looks very cinematic, it's very, very powerful, and it gets across a story to us in a manner that allows us to be quite passive. We can sit back and we can watch this unfolding cutscene along with all the protagonist lines being spoken for us by the character that they have created. It lends itself very well for that cinematic storytelling experience, something that the Witcher games have always been pretty good at. Even the early ones, even the first one, which was a, technically flawed game, they have always wanted to tell a story, and the voiced protagonist really does lend itself very well for telling that story. Conversely, it's not necessarily a good thing if you as the player are trying to make the protagonist your own, if you are trying to create your own character and tell your own story. This is where a silent protagonist suddenly comes to the fore as the stronger option. You get to decide how your character sounds. Does he have a gruff voice? Does he have a high-pitched voice? Does he speak with an accent? A speech impediment perhaps? Perhaps he just sounds completely different. You have this idea of a voice in your head. And that will lend itself very well to the kind of idea where you create your own character. Now, I'm not saying that you cannot have a cinematic storytelling experience with a silent protagonist, because I'm sure you can. And I'm not saying a voice protagonist prevents you from having a personal character that you've made and a lot of replayability. What I'm saying is each type of protagonist lends itself slightly better to a different sort of game. And you can probably see where this is going. The question is, what sort of game is Fallout 4? And what sort of game did Bethesda want it to be? Now, I stated clearly in the first video that my opinion is that Bethesda are pretty well known for the open games where the world is open, the character is open, the adventure is open. They make games that are very replayable. And so whilst I do accept there are people out there who prefer a voiced protagonist, like there are people who prefer a silent protagonist, I think the game itself prefers a silent protagonist. I think the things that make Bethesda games what they are, the strengths that Bethesda games possess, are enhanced by the silent protagonist and harmed by the voiced protagonist. I am genuinely confused as to why on earth they actually went in this direction. I don't think the silent protagonist was something people were complaining about. This is not one of the complaints I have heard levelled against their games in the past. It certainly hasn't come up on my radar, and I actually don't see any other signs that they're trying to adjust the game. Perhaps they're trying to take the game in a new direction exactly. I get the feeling that they just thought this was a cool feature to add and didn't really think it through. It strikes me as the sort of thing you add because someone came up with an idea and everyone nodded, but nobody sat down and said, right, but what does it add? What value do we get from this? What does it bring to the table, and at what cost? Because everything you add will come at a cost. And that's what it seems to me. It seems like nobody actually asked the most important question. Why are we doing this? Is it going to sell more games? Because I don't think it will. Is it going to improve people's experiences? For some, yes. For others, no. But what about our core fan group, the people who love our games? Have they been complaining about this? Perhaps we should spend time developing something else. I'm sure there are plenty of other things people complain about. Perhaps we could work on that instead. Now, I don't want people to think I'm criticising the voice actors either. They did a great job. I think they did absolutely fine. And I'm going to tell you now, I'm quite happy with the male voice actor for my first playthrough. I'm actually playing a character that quite suits his voice. It's so that's fine. I don't mind doing my first playthrough with his voice. And I love the female voice actor. I think she's great, but whenever I hear her voice, I always think of Jack from Mass Effect 2. But, you know, I'm not disrespecting their work. Don't get me wrong. I just don't feel this feature fit a Bethesda game. In the end, I would say this was not a win for Fallout 4. In the end, perhaps for some people it was a win for them, but I don't think it was a win for the game. I don't think it was a win for Bethesda, and the only reason I'm not scoring it as a massive loss is the fact that Bethesda make their games very, very moddable, and there is already a mod that removes the voiced protagonist. It seems pretty solid. There are a few other things I think need to be handled. For example, you do need to turn off the conversation camera if you're going to use this mod, or at least I recommend doing it. And there is a bug with that feature. Not with the mod, but with the game itself. Something that Bethesda have to fix. In a couple of conversations, apparently it can glitch out if you are talking to more than one person. Apparently it can glitch out. I cannot confirm that, but I have read it. But that is a glitch with the game, not the mod. You get that if you disable the conversation camera, which is an in-game feature. You can disable it without any mods. So, you know, don't blame that on the mod. The mod itself seems to work as long as you use the new dialogue interface mod, and honestly, when using those mods together, I just got the feeling that I was playing an old Bethesda game, like I was playing Skyrim. The conversations felt just like that. I haven't finished the game yet, so I cannot confirm it will work all the way to the end, but I don't see any reason why not, as long as Bethesda fix that bug, or the modding community does, which, you know, will happen if they don't. So, in the end, whilst I would have scored it as a loss otherwise, I'm going to score it neutrally, I think. Nice try, Bethesda. Not sure what you were going for. Please don't do it again. Look at your fan base, look at the strengths of your game, and work towards your strengths. Look at the things the player base are complaining about and fix them by all means. And if you want to experiment in other areas and improve, I'm all for that. But always ask yourself a question: does this new feature come at a cost? What is that cost? And can we bear it? And in this case, I have to say the cost was too high. So there you have it. That is my thinking, my rambling thoughts on the voiced protagonist. I'm sorry that I went on for quite some time, but this is one of those topics that was likely to spark quite a lot of conflict, both in the comments and everywhere else, and B, I felt it was quite probably one of the more important topics to cover in depth. In the next video, I'm actually going to talk about something a little more exciting. I want to talk about the combat, both the mechanics, how the game feels when you're in combat, and the difficulty.
It's all over, but the crowd